been working with Just Space and Richard in designing a module in the School of Planning, which is taught and taken by our MSc in Spatial Planning student. And this year she's piloted a new approach whereby instead of doing a conventional planning project, they're given a brief for a hypothetical client from a local authority to design a plan for a site. This year, Elena has taken on the challenge to actually work with community groups to get the students to do planning projects that are directly serving the need for knowledge of particular community groups in London. So she's going to report on that particular experience, challenges and lessons from it.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. And I'm very happy I come after Richard, because maybe I'll try to show that it can be done, and you can work with community groups and acknowledge them, and research directly supporting their agenda. As Claire said, what I'm going to talk about here and to show you is how you can design a learning and a teaching environment that works with community groups, works with community activists, and that it does work as a space where these different groups and the instructors and the students learn and teach. It's kind of sharing environment. And I will also explain or highlight what the ethical dimension to me are or have manifested. And these dimensions are around very practical issues. I see the protocol as a form of ethics in practice, and is not far from what Karen was saying about things that you should remember to do, which are very practical and safeguard that respect and relationship, about the subjectivities that emerge in these processes, some of which are sort of welcomed, changes that we want to see happening in the planning communities, in the community organizations, in the teaching stuff, and some instead are imposed by the particular processes that we are witnessing. And then I will also say something about the differences, the ethical problem in the difference between authorship and ownership, which doesn't only apply to writing. It applies to, if you have a planning document, who's the author and who's the owner, then I believe the community should be the owner. That's basically where I come from. So this is about the certain second time, I don't know, that I talk about this work, and every time I have found myself starting by confessing the unease I have, and of talking about this, because this is only me. Here I'm here, and I was coordinating this project, and I worked with Richard Lee and my colleagues, but obviously the students were producing this module, the community groups were producing it, so I'm only here as myself, and I think this feeling of being unease is the best learning for me, and it's kind of put me always on alert. And the other premise I want to make is I'm grateful to Claire for bringing me here, and Janet, because it has given me the opportunity to think about whether there are any ethical problems in the work that I've been doing, of which if there are, I take responsibility. So the module that I'm presenting here, as Claire said, was designed to provide a practical project-based component of 2 MSc programs in spatial planning and urban design and city planning. The modules, most of the MSc programs at the Bartlett have a theoretical component and practical component, and I mostly have worked in the past on the practical and project-based components, and these are designed to expose the students to the tension of practical plan making, which are often between creativity and critical thinking, but also how to resolve a variety of demands that are made by different interests into one single set of planning intervention. That's the idea behind the kind of planning projects that we work on, and there's a plurality of demands that are assumed to be existing. So power. So the peculiarity of the project that I've been working on, as Claire said, is that it sort of challenges this idea. It also challenges the idea of teaching through an artificial environment where community needs are assumed. Maybe there can be some critical thinking about what they are, but in general they are assumed. And sort of turns the cake upside down and starts with saying, with asking students to put themselves, as planners, to put themselves in the listening position and in the kind of technical service position with, values and critical thinking behind it, but to basically work on projects which are directly selected by community groups and then are selected because they support the advancement of that community agenda. So that's the main thing. Students work with community groups on agendas and on projects that are set by community groups. There's a first ethical principle here, which is, what should you challenge that agenda? And is that agenda representative? That's a question that I leave out. Behind this idea of working with community groups and teaching planning as community groups is the concept of community-led planning and the non-neutrality of planning and the current imbalances of power and how can planning contribute in changes or is part and parcel of that imbalances or can help changing. And by planning I mean everything from the institution to the theories of change that accompany those institutions. And I have used these two quotes quite a lot because they are important to frame the project. It's about imagining and practicing a different urban future. And I don't think we can do that on our own as academics, however critical, and as planners, however progressive. And then I see Peter Marcuse as responding to Eric's finger and says, there is another question, what is desirable for whom, by whom, in what balance? So these are the guiding principles of working with community groups. This is how I've rationalized it for me. It's my own way of making sense of my decision to work, my crazy decision to work with community groups. And it sort of follows to be shaped it kind of gets shaped into these 3 lines of work. And these 3 lines of work have, to me, emerged strongly from the work that Just Space has been doing in the past with community groups. And of what works, what is helpful in order to foster and to support these community agendas, whether in a more open and kind of idea of planning or even within the current planning system. Because the construction of alternative narratives has basically been translated into the work that Just Space has done in producing evidence that alter the direction of truth within policy making. The recognition of social conflict and agonistic politics, so there is not one single orthodox hegemonic set of values, but that sets of values, different sets of values, should and can and must be put into agonistic positions so that we can have an honest discussion about these urban futures. And then the importance of the collective ownership of process. So disentangling, opening up the planning process so that there's a sense of ownership, a sense of production of that process as well, which is often one of the problems in the planning practice. And I don't remember who amongst you said that there's a gap between what researcher can do in order to find evidence and then the sort of obscure and non-transparent world of decision making. I think you have to see these as a process, as a long-term process in which you generate change by opening up. We wouldn't, sorry, yes, I have to quicker, but I don't think we would have what has happened with now, with the ways in which the idea of viability assessment has been taken broadly, if we didn't have that kind of collaboration and that hard work between communities and some academics that have led to that. I'll skip that. So basically this is is community groups, which you can see here. The project was also framed within the idea of neighborhood planning. This is less relevant for the work we did, but has some, to me, has some interesting. I talked about this in another context, where neighborhood planning was much more of a framework, and I think it has some problems in the creation of subjectivities. We worked on a diversity of tools, students produced a diversity of tools, evidence-based policy and design, site allocation, design, the planning process, and this is more or less what we produced. And I was thinking again about some recurrent themes of the co-production of knowledge, the need to also develop co-produced methodologies. And there were the students that, the project that ended up producing methodologies. The methodologies are co-produced and are produced so that communities can use them. These are designed so that communities can then use them in a way, in an emancipatory way. It's not, you don't need us anymore. You can do your own work. These are the kind of mapping tools. Karen talked about it, others talked about it. I think there is a great overlap. And I don't have here the link to where the projects are, but I need to ask the community groups and the students and the space and me who co-own these projects whether they can be shared. And after that, I can share it. So I just finished quickly on these ideas about challenges to ethics. Ethics has a very practical dimension, which has the dimension of respecting community groups' routine and academic routines. This project was 11 weeks and then we're done, but community groups have also got their own routines and timetabling. Format, even format of documents, digital documents, this idea that whatever you do has to be then become available. Yeah? So there are these dimensions. In terms of subjectivities, I think that my experience, and again is my experience, two are important. And one is that the community group can become a client in the best possible way that you can think about this work, which is the community can make themselves capable of requesting, of working with experts and request what they need, which might not always be there. Yeah? And it's going to become more and more an opportunity. I'm also thinking about how far are we away from the idea of the community as a developer and what this would mean for planners, real estate professionals, architects. Yeah? That's something to start thinking about. And then the idea, very old, but I think should come back, the planners as an advocate of community positions. And then, for instance, there is also some enforced subjectivities related to the organizations in which we move. So the planning and, for instance, neighborhood planning enforce a certain kind of organizations upon community groups that then generate some identities and whether they are positive or not. But then, finally, the idea of authorship and ownership. I think this is coming out of the many discussions we've had with students as their position, and I think a position a lot of the planners tend to be that because they are the author, they kind of feel that there is a role of the author which is also of the owner. The author is the author of a document, but ownership is separate from it. And at whichever level of profession, we should be able to acknowledge that. Maybe because of plagiarism, we are more minded to do this in the academic environment. But I think it's a real issue. It's very difficult to disentangle, but it's a very important issue. Sorry for